Welcome back to Story Deep Dive with Dana and Rachel. This is a podcast with book coaches, editors, and besties, and we discuss books, not as readers, but as writers to draw on inspiration, great books, and lots of laughs. And listen, y'all, we are continuing the conversation about Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. We are talking about characters today. And if you are new around here, what's up? Thank
If
you
you're
for
new
joining
around
us.
here, I'm sorry that this is where you're starting. I a little bit feel bad if you're new here.
She's apologizing because she picked this book, y'all. Okay. No. But like she should be.
If you're new here, you instantly know everything you need to know about me.
Oh my. No, there's got to be more. There is so much more. She's an amazing person. She's really not this dark and gloomy.
Despite her book picks, she's an amazing person. Don't let this fool you.
Look, y'all, I've known her a long time. Every book pick, I'm just like, do I really? No. With that said, we're going to be talking about Sharp Objects. We are enjoying this read, but it is something that is different. I don't want to say different because we've had other books that are different, so it's not different for us. I think it adds a new variety to our lineup, which is a great thing to balance out with my steamy romance. And we are going to continue talking about characters today. But before we do that, Rachel, what do you have going on over there at Story Cypher?
Hello. Yes, thank you. I would like to say that I am a decent person. And what I think you should know as well is like I picked this really gritty pick, and I'm like, as an editor, I'm very nice. Like working with me, I'm like so pleasant and very like supportive. And I just feel like, yeah, if you're new here, you might wonder, or you might see this book and be like, oh, she's the one. That's my girl right there. You want weird gritty stuff? Like that's found my lane. So anyway. So over at Story Cypher, we have just done something that I love getting to do this for the fellows. So again, the fellows are the graduates of Novel 101. Novel 101 being the 6-month like entry course to get you through your first 2 drafts of your story, and then the fellows program being ongoing training and like support through the revision process. Again, since we've been talking, in case someone's new here, I'm like, better put the context in. And one of the things that we do is act hot seats for our students. So they submit their most recently revised act of their story. And they submit it not just to me, but to the group as a whole. And we come together and we talk about it. And this is their opportunity to get some feedback, to see how it's landing. And so one of our students earlier this year, she did her Act 1 hot seat. And let me tell you, the group was hooked. Like, we read Act 1 and we were all like, wait, I want to know about this thing. What about this thing? I want to know more about this. And like, we were so excited. And then she submitted her second act. And we were like, yes, she's fine. We were waiting for her to submit Act 2 so we could all read it because we wanted to know what was going to happen. And so we've gotten to come around and like talk about her second act, right? She's able to ask questions of the group of like, okay, what landed for you? Because you've read Act 1, right? So we're reading in context, right? She's able to be like, you know, were there things that I didn't deliver on that you were hoping to see, and able to like get that feedback from myself and from, you know, the fellow writers in the group. And it's so fun to get to do that. Like, it's such a cool experience for, especially because some of our writers, they don't have a lot of experience sharing their writing, and your first hot seat is like so nerve-wracking, right? Because you're like putting your writing up to be, it's getting exposed to other people who are not you. But every one of our writers who has done it has loved it, and like has gotten so much like helpful feedback of like, oh, this thing didn't come across clearly. And so they're able to like tweak it to make it better. But then also like getting to see that like people love their story and are excited about their story and get to see things that even they didn't notice about their own writing. So getting to, I love, we only get to do them Every other month, just because of the amount of time it takes to like read them, and then we have to submit it all in advance and stuff. But it's so I love doing it. And we just got to do one for, like I said, one of our students, her second act. And it was so fun and it was so good. And she got all of this like amazing feedback that's just like fueling her going into her third and fourth act revisions. So that's what we've been up to recently over in the Fellows program. And it's just been, I love getting to do it. It's so good. So we're having a good time over here. What about you? What do you got going on over at
Okay.
Danger Tales?
So I'm gonna tell you, but I have some questions. Okay, is there like when they get ready to submit it, is it like a certain length, or like what are the logistics of that so that everyone has time to read it? And
Mhm.
is feedback just given orally, or do people give notes, or like what is that like as far as
Yeah.
that part of the experience?
Yeah, so I will say that, right now, it being a smaller group, we're able to be pretty lax about it. As it grows, we might have to like, schedule that out in advance and do like a lot more logistically. But as it
Mhm.
is right now, we go through the 4 act structure quite a lot. We teach it pretty intensively, and so they sort of know where they intend to end their act. And so they submit the full act. So if they're writing a novella, it's shorter. If they're writing a novel, it's longer. They submit it, and then usually they submit at least 2 weeks in advance, so that everyone has plenty of time to read it. And then their feedback, by and large, is given. So, and also what I do, I should mention this, is I give framing questions to the group of like, okay, read the story, and then here are the kinds of questions I want you to be thinking about. Because rather than giving aimless feedback of like, well, I like this thing, I didn't like this thing, which can just be sort of like unmotivated in terms of like you think about motivated camera movement, intentionally motivated movement. Um, it helps them to give the author feedback that they can actually work with. So, for example, in Act
Mhm.
One, it's like, what themes were you seeing introduced in the first act? What do you expect? Like, what is the story promise you think that you're getting based on Act One? What would you expect to see in the climax? And framing questions of like their experience to help the writer who submitted calibrate, did I make the right promise? Are they picking up on the right themes, or am I amiss somewhere? Because then they have me there as the editor to then help them say, okay, you're getting this feedback. Here's why I think that is. And here's how you can, again, calibrate that to do whatever it is that you want it to do. So we do all of that orally, and then some of our students will make notes and give them over to the writer if they want them. And so it's up to the students, like what they want to do and how. But we have had our like some of our students like be like, hey, I have a bunch of notes, you don't have to take them, do you want all of them? And of course the writers who submit are always like, I want all of the notes, give
All
me
of the notes.
everything you
That's
have.
right.
So that's how
I
we do it.
love that. It makes me think of like whenever we do alpha reads, because
Mm-hmm.
it's like it's early enough in the process, but it's also late enough in the process where they pretty much have
Exactly.
got a really great handle on it, so that
Mm-hmm.
that feedback coming in has a place to settle. And giving them the guided questions also means that we're not doing the off the wall stuff, and we're not looking at line by line stuff. We really are following the flow of the story,
Mm-hmm.
the themes, whether or not the characters are landing, if there are parts of the story where you sort of check out
Mm-hmm.
because it didn't land well.
Yep.
I love that. And especially if you're in an environment where you trust the people that are giving you the feedback, because it helps you
Yes.
to really grow, because you are so close to it,
Mm-hmm.
that having that outside sort of, voices coming in. I love that. And I love that she got to do the act too, because then you guys could also see whether she took what you said before
Exactly.
and carried it forward.
Yeah, which was so good because she absolutely, like, there was one thing that happened in Act One that we were all like, "Oh my god, I want more! Like, what's gonna happen with this thing? I want more!" And she was like, "I'd better put more of that in Act Two then, in that case." And she did, and like there's still more to come in Act Three and Four, but it really like let her know like what's really capturing the audience's attention so that she can deliver on those things. So yeah, and just to your point, when you do this in the process, we don't do this during the 6 months. Your story isn't ready for it during the 6 months, right? Like that's too early. But once you've had a chance to more intentionally revise and you understand your story and you've had the chance to actually go through and shape it according to that vision, now that you have that clarity, now is a great time to bring in that alpha read. And so that timing of when we do or don't do that kind of thing, and then letting it be guided so that, like you said, it's not just like off the wall, what did you think, right? And then that's also difficult for the reviewers, right? Because then they're like, well, what do you want to know? So it just facilitates a really like healthy, really enjoyable experience for everybody involved, that it's both helpful and encouraging and doesn't ever feel like it gets lost.
Because one of the things that you find when you're doing it early like that, it's like it's good to catch things that they think is on the page, but it's not. Right. And then if you ask the question, they begin explaining all this stuff. And this is wonderful, but I don't see it here. Yes. Right. And beginning to be able to, it's almost like its own version of learning how to calibrate. And it helps you with writing into the future, because you'll start seeing those patterns and things that people do, especially in early drafts. I love that. I love it. Love it. Love it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. What do you got going on over at Danger Tales?
Absolutely nothing in all of the things. As always, I feel like, listen, this is what I have done for today. First of all, with Danger Tales, by the time you guys are watching this, we are coming back from our summer break, which is really great. But one of the things that I want to talk about today has nothing to do with Danger Tales. Okay, y'all. Why am I doing right now? This is the first time Rachel's hearing about this. If y'all can't see her face,
I'm like, oh my God, I haven't gotten this update. I'm getting it live on air. What's happening? I need to know everything.
Live on the air, like 5 months. It's like, no, we're not 5 months.
Yeah, right.
But
this isn't exactly live television.
Exactly. We're live in living color. One of the things that I've been doing in my life has been working really hard to create my perfect day. And it's right, like, tell you more, like, meaning, like, no one goes into this, whether it's in business or writing or into your profession, to say like, my whole life has been being inundated with this thing. Right. And so I really sat down and started saying, like, what would make a perfect day for me? And being like specific of like what those inputs are, like, reading. One of the things that is a part of it. Now, listen, y'all, this is a part of my perfect day. It doesn't feel real perfect right now, but I'm hoping that in time it will feel better, which is I'm training for a half marathon. Yeah, girl, listen, today's run, I was like, Texas, we had some good, we crossed somebody because it's hot.
I feel like we hit summer early. Like with maximum, I feel convinced, this is just an aside, that I think that it's false that there's nothing higher than 100% humidity. I don't think that can be correct. I'm like, you can tell me that technically, yes, at 100% it's raining. I don't believe you. Move to the Gulf Coast and tell me if you still think that there's no such thing as above 100% humidity.
Listen, if you think that, come to Houston. Okay, that's right. Come to Houston. Welcome. Okay, so I'm training for a half marathon. Part of it, like, I read all the time, but reading books that are on my reading list, because it's going to be something that is beneficial to what I do, how I write, and it's about having this conversation with myself around, I don't know, I think it's about time, right? Like, you can be the person that you're living a life that you're putting off everything until you retire, whatever that's supposed to mean, because I don't even think that truly exists anymore. Or you're doing all the things that you love all the time, or there's some like happy in between, right? So for me, it's, quilting, or doing my quiet time in the morning and making sure I'm having balance. And it's not until you are aiming to be intentional about making that a regular part of your life do you realize like how off-centered you have been. Do I feel like I'm all the way there? No. So I'm giving myself. So I did it like, y'all know I like a good challenge. If you don't know, now you know. As if I have any time for anything else. But we're not going to talk about that. I've done, like, if you've ever heard of the 75 hard challenge, I've done 75 hard, I've done 75 soft, which is a made up thing, but I've done 75 soft. And I was just like, you know what if I did 75 days again? And making this to be almost like habit stacking of things that I want to continue.
Yeah.
Not just doing it just because someone says do these 6 things. So I picked 6 specific things. I gave myself wiggle room for hard days.
Yeah.
And I've shared it with my husband and my daughter, so I won't get off track. So they will ask questions. We're gonna do it like this. It's still early in the process, but it feels really good because not only am I doing it, like aiming to do it, but checking in with myself about when I am doing it, when I'm not, what's going on. And I think as writers, like, you can kind of get in this loop where you just come in, sit down, you're on the computer, come down, sit down, and the world sort of passing you by. Now, granted, y'all, I'm not the people person, so I'm not trying to run to do anything social. However, you still need balance. You need to move. You need to get out. So, so that's not Danger Tales per se. However, it does make me better for Danger Tales.
Yeah.
And so, just doing that. And then by the end, also wanting to be at consistently maintaining the hours that I want to work as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is not easy.
Oh, yeah, listen, at the time of this recording, my husband and I are on day 9 of working without a break. 9 straight days, just right through. That's not, let me tell you, go ahead.
I was like, you're the worst boss ever. That's all I was about to say.
I am. Which is crazy because, like, when I was director in a writing program, so I had people who, had to, like, that reported to me. I was like, are you taking breaks? Are you taking care of yourself? The most hypocritical nonsense is coming from me and my work-life balance. But this is, like, so important for, like, a creative life, right? Like, where, like, yes, we want to log our writing hours. That is, like, the novel doesn't get written if we don't sit down to write it at some point. However, we also sabotage ourselves when we get and this is not necessarily you, but just general, or you know what? It's me. It's me. It's me. I'm going to use myself as an example. When we get so obsessed with completing the thing that we just keep grinding and grinding and grinding and grinding and grinding, and we don't find any balance with, there are other things in life. This thing is important. That is absolutely true. But the moment it becomes like a taskmaster, right, where it's like driving you from behind, it starts to, like, those are the things that will, like, sort of send you straight into burnout, or that, like, will sort of ultimately harm your creativity. There are periods of time when we hustle. That, I mean, ask any author on a deadline. Okay, like, there are times, but if you're doing that 24/7, 365, you're going to hurt yourself. And again, it's actually not facilitating your creative life. And so, like you said, we are 2 people who our job is at our desk. That means that getting up and moving is super, super, like, you have to be extra intentional about it. And the same thing, like, writers, our job is at our desk. It's really important to get up and move. Like, it's going to help you, I promise. Getting out, taking walks, exercising, that is going to actually feed into your writing in a very positive way.
And that's another reason why I think doing it in the scope of a challenge has been so helpful, because I'm writing about it. I'm not a hardcore journaler, but I do. So journaling about it, because it's helping me to sort of wrap my mind around it. And that thing that you're talking about, that you're sort of like grinding until thing gets done. And it's like, but the reality is, you get this thing done, it's just going to be another thing. It'll go from this thing to another thing. That thing turns into another thing. So I've been working really intentional about getting to a good stopping place. Listen.
You are, this is just firing on all cylinders over here. Keep talking. Guys, this is about to turn into Dana's coaching Rachel and how she needs to go live her life. You guys get to sit and enjoy. So take notes.
When Rachel does this, if that ain't the Baptist,
This is like the positive version of clutching my pearls, right? This is not,
girl.
ooh, it's,
Look,
ooh.
say more. Come on.
Oh my gosh. Southern girl just jumped right out of my body.
All the way. And I'm here for it. Because this is the thing that is so hard. And y'all, listen, this is not a faith-based thing, but I'm going to tell you, I have to pray about it. Because I was just like, Lord, help me to find a good stopping place. Mm-hmm. Because there are times when you get to the end, do you have more that you could do? Yes. Sometimes you even have more time that you've allocated for it. But if you start a new thing and then all of a sudden it just gobbles up that time and you look up and you've been at your desk doing the same thing all day. And the reality is it's not good physically, but it's not good mentally. And a lot of times it's not good for your spirit, because then you start seeing this diminished returns on what you're doing. And so I just really had to be like, okay, help me to find a good stopping place. Mm-hmm. Another thing is like not feeling bad about doing things that I want to do. Now, by default, I'm not that person. Look, listen, I have a million hobbies because I love all of them, and I'm not going to let any of them go. So I don't naturally feel bad, but you can, if you feel like you have a bunch of work to do, you stopping to go to, like, you like to go to a coffee shop or go to a good pastry place, mm-hmm. or just to get out, you know what I mean? That can feel like I have other things waiting on me and other people that are waiting for me to get things back to them. But the reality is those things are what help you show up and to be your best self. Going to a movie, reading a different book, right? Doing those things are what helps you to bring this creative energy. And the other thing about that has been this: if you see yourself doing it for the foreseeable future, mm-hmm. you are not helping that by trying to cram it. Why? Because a thing turns into a thing, turns into a thing, turns into a thing. Yep. So it's sort of been this sort of rhythm, this new rhythm of coming hand in hand with my natural rhythm as far as how I'm setting my schedule. You know, I am about that. And then also how I'm setting my day-to-day times, and being more focused on that. And now about finding these natural cutoff times, having blocks. When the block is up, it is up. And if I get done a little early, even better. And sort of starting to feel like what that is about. And what begins to happen is you start uncovering all the little culprits as to why you have that unhealthy balance in the first place. Y'all listen, I'm going to tell y'all this one and then we're going to move on, because I'm going to give y'all this one for free. I have a bad habit of seeing a goal as this individual thing when it is sitting on top of 50 other things that I need to do it. I know I have that bad. Listen, it would be like, oh, I have this reading list. Okay, like it's this one singular thing, and you look at the reading list and it's 50 books. Like, it's insane. But so beginning to see that. And so now when I'm looking for healthy cutoff times and blocks, now when I'm writing things out in my planner, I'm already starting to chunk it down. I'm not trying to. So girl, if you see my list, it's good. Listen, I got a list for lists, but it means that it's sort of slowly migrating as actionable things. And so it just feels better. It feels like I'm being more present. It's like I'm honoring myself and my time. You know what? I'm so in the earlier stages, y'all. By the time y'all see this, ask me to do a check-in. But I feel good because these are things that I've always wanted to do. And it's like, we're not promised tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're just not. Mm-hmm. And I want to live my best life now.
Yeah.
I'm not waiting till later. And being that I'm a person where it's the little things that just give me all up in giggles and grins, baby, I'm doing all the little things. I'm getting the fabrics. I'm getting the things. I'm just having a good old time. And so now it's like aligning the work that I enjoy to be able to have the longevity. For somebody who's been doing this for so long, I'm like, I've been doing this almost 20 years. Man. It is not going anywhere, Dana. Yeah. You staying up another hour. Like,
it'll still be there in the morning.
Listen, if it's not, it's somebody else's problem. Yeah. Just stop. Go sit, stretch out, watch a movie, do
Yeah.
nothing, watch a YouTube video. I don't care. I'm not condoning doom scrolling, whatever you do, whatever you do. But I think having something else that brings in that fire and that passion in you that is
Mm-hmm.
not just your writing, because when it becomes a part of your professional, it can get very murky. Those
Yeah.
lines between professional and personal
Mm.
are non-existent, and you need them there
Mm-hmm.
because it's a part of how you execute, and it's also a part of how you refuel.
Yeah.
And if you're someone who loves story, it's also how you entertain yourself and you love it. And it's
Yeah.
just so yeah. So that's what I'm doing. So it's helping Danger Tales, but y'all, it's totally. I'll let y'all know how it's going. The training. I got my first race. I signed up for it.
What's the
Listen,
date?
if I don't melt, the first one is in. I don't know the date. I don't know the
Okay.
date. It's in September. I think it's like the last Sunday in September.
Okay.
So there's this will be lasting for real. There's a little. It's a bridge. It's called a Texas Bridge Series. I don't know why they call it that because it's not around Texas. It's just around Houston. But the point is, it's called the Texas Bridge Series. Each of the races benefit women's domestic abuse shelters.
Mm.
And what they do is it's 3 races across 4 months. And listen, the reason why I did it in the beginning was because if you do all 3, they give you a big ass medal. Listen.
I love that.
When I did it the first time and I got that 4th medal, when you cross the last race, that 3rd race, they'll give you 2 medals. If you've done the other ones, girl, I felt like Flavor Flav. Girl, I was clanking like I was rich. Listen, anyways. So you do, it's a progressive. So you do 2 10Ks and then the third one. So it's September, October, 10Ks. And then November is the half marathon. So that's what I got.
I'm glad they saved the half marathon for November. Whew.
Oh yeah, they do. Oh, it's a part. I've done it. Like I've done this one for you. I used to do it every year, and then I stopped, and I realized like I could look back and was like, that's when stuff started going awry. So I was like, let me get back. It was enough to keep me training, and then it's enough of a spread to get in the groove, especially because it's hot here. Mm-hmm. So you have to be mindful when you're training outdoors or whatever. So yeah, September. I'll keep y'all posted.
I honestly, I could spend the whole episode talking about all of this. I'm like, oh my God, we need to have a conversation offline because like you have no idea like where I'm at, like what's going on over here and why this is like, oh, I might need to get in on that. Okay. So we'll have to just come back around.
Let's do a clock it. You have to. And then y'all will get to this. But I guess the part of another reason why I want to share it here is because for many of us, this is a lifelong goal, right? And it's a lifelong dream. And it's not going to happen overnight. You know, there are going to be times where you're just writing a story to complete it, to get it done. And then you move that what you've learned into the next one. And that's all a part of the process. But at the same time, if you sort of like, it's like if you love a certain thing and you just eat it every day, at some point you're going to stop loving it. Mm-hmm. And you're going to turn something that was your dream thing into like a disaster or something that you dislike or you feel like you're being forced. And even though you don't tell yourself that, we carry it in our bodies. Yeah. Right. And in our energy and in our shoulders and in our limbs if you're typing all the time. And so I think it's important that if you really love it, protect it. Protect it by protecting yourself. And so, yeah. So with that said, I know you got all the questions. That's all right. Because I'm here for them. But we are going to come on. We're going to come back around. But what we're going to do is get into this conversation. I would love for you to give us the summary as well as the caveat before we start talking about characters and sharp objects.
Yes, ma'am. So caveat first, if you have content sensitivities, I do recommend taking a look at something like the Trigger Warning Database. Again, the title is Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. So this does cover some difficult topics. We won't really go into them here in the podcast, but if you're planning on reading this book, I highly recommend, and you have content sensitivities in particular, I highly recommend you just take care of yourself, protect yourself by checking that to make sure that this is going to be a book that's safe for you to experience. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into the summary. So, fresh from a brief stay at a psych hospital, reporter Camille Preaker faces a troubling assignment. She must return to her tiny hometown to cover the murders of two preteen girls. For years, Camille has hardly spoken to her neurotic, hypochondriac mother or to the half sister she barely knows, a beautiful 13-year-old with an eerie grip on the town. Now, installed in her old bedroom in her family's Victorian mansion, Camille finds herself identifying with the young victims, a bit too strongly. Dogged by her own demons, she must unravel the psychological puzzle of her own past if she wants to get to the story and survive this homecoming.
Well, Rachel, you just gave us the summary. We would love to know what are the topics that you would love to discuss around characters in the story. And we gave the caveat, but it's also we cannot talk about everything, but we're going to talk about the things that rose to the top in our pre-show conversations. And so, what are some of the things you would like for us to discuss in today's episode?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I think, I've got sort of, again, three overarching topics. We are going to once again talk about tone, theme, and your cast, right? Like, this is, again, you talked about in last week's episode how sometimes when you see a very extreme example, it's such a great way to look at the mechanics of how certain things function. And this is absolutely that. So I really want to talk about how tone and theme actually impact the way you make your cast. Obviously, we definitely need to talk about Camille as our protagonist and the way that Gillian Flynn handles her. I know we both have, plenty of notes on that. And then I'd like to have just like a brief discussion on the secondary cast. Now, that's going to include, characters like Curry and Richard, the detective. It's going to include her sister Emma and her mom Adora. So, that's just sort of like our like containing bucket, and then we'll kind of get into the secondary cast where we're able to. So those are my big ones. What's on your list there, Dana?
I think a lot of what I want to talk about folds into your topics. I don't think I have any other big ones. Other than the fact that I would add Alan onto us talking about the secondary characters. And I do kind of want to, I kind of think talking a little bit about trauma as a character. I know, meaning like not go into a whole lot of detail, but I think this goes into the conversation that we talked about where I feel like the wound that's shared by Camille and Adora and Amma. Am I saying her name?
Emma, yeah.
Emma, yeah, is the same wound. And I think that was a very interesting choice. And that choice is sort of connected in trauma.
Yeah.
And not to give spoilers, but I think that was a very interesting choice to make.
Yeah.
And I think it ties directly into your first topic, which is tone, theme, and cast. So maybe if we start there, and I may be just sprinkling that in, not as a standalone thing, but it just is chomping at the bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, last week we talked about how tone shapes the contents of your plot, right? Like, that's going to determine how far that story goes and then how much of it we see on the page. Really, the same thing is going to be true for your cast, right? So, each each character in this small town borders on despicable, right? Like there's so many of these characters that or you might say fully crosses the line into despicable, but you have these terrible desperate people, and that is like the almost the whole entire cast. And it has this sort of tragic kind of, it's like this overhanging tragic sense of what this town is and what it does to people. And remember last week we talked about, the tone is very dark, right? Again, it deals with very deep themes of violence and control. And so your cast basically is going to contribute to that tone as well, right? Literally the kinds of people that you stock your story with. So I want to give a counterexample just to kind of help illustrate this point. Now, this is going to be like a crazy counterexample because we're going to like the way far opposite side of the spectrum here. But think about last year, The Things We Never Got Over, right? This is a rom-com, so totally way on the opposite side, light, fun, right? But also small town, right? But what the hallmark of the characters in this small town you would sort of say quirky, right? You have all these kind of fun, weird kind of characters who are generally lovable. They have their flaws, but they're overall, like, again, quirky is kind of the word we would use to describe them. If we go maybe tonally slightly closer to sharp objects, right? So if we have like sharp objects on one side and the things we never got over on the other, in the middle, we would have the woman in the library. So these are, probably slightly more realistic characters that are still, they're fun, they're individual, but each with their own little, like, single streak of darkness, right? When we're looking at this is a murder mystery and the people in the cast have the potential to have committed a murder, there's like a streak where you're like, oh, that's a little something about them that I could see where maybe they're our killer. But think about the ratio, right? Of like generally fun, lovable with a streak of like potential for maybe they're the killer, versus every single person in Sharp Objects in this town is awful. Almost every single one of them. So they are largely, right? You look at so many of the women that we meet, they're catty, they're cruel, they're backstabbing, right? They kind of have this mode of verbal violence that they perpetrate against each other. You meet, like, the dad of one of the girls who died, and he's just this husk of a human being. All of these people, right, they're marked by this kind of this desperation in the town. And so the point here is that this is a very heavy story, which means your cast is going to reflect that. One of the ways that you continue this tone, one of the ways that you implement this tone, so to speak, is in the kinds of characters that we meet. So imagine if we had like a knock 'em out character in this story, right? We would feel like, what planet did this, like, do we have some kind of like fan fiction crossover happening here? Where did you come from? But so when you think about what your story sets out to explore and how you want what you want the reader to experience, right? Emotionally, even viscerally, your cast is going to play a part in that. So if you have a specific vision for that, or if you're right, when you think about the tone of your story, you're looking to see that your cast fits the overarching tone of your story. And this is a great example of that, because our cast is so largely shaped by these themes of violence and control, and they contribute to our theme of this sort of desperate, sad, small town. And that's what you would expect for the story, because if they didn't, it would feel like a mismatch.
I think there are so many ways that this can go. I think the thing that stands out to me is that it dictates your lens. Right. And it's like, it's how you see. You sort of started when you talk about that spectrum of like knock 'em out versus, sharp objects, right? The lens that you sort of you're telling the reader that here's the coloration that we're using, right? Here's the filter that we're using. It begins to dictate everything. And it's how you see everyone. And I always love to look for ways to sort of make the story balance, and not balance as in one for one, but a lot of times you're going to have, especially here, it was such an interesting way that she used secondary characters. I can't remember what the character was that was like, baby, pack your bags and leave.
Jackie.
Right. Jackie. Right. She's like, she's tipsy. She's medicated on narcotics in different ways, but baby, she is clear when she says this. And it's sort of because of the lens and the dynamic of the town and everybody that you've met. You don't know whether to take that as a real warning that maybe this is not the place for you. And Camille is already tipsy on life, okay? And because of the circumstances, you don't know how to take that. And that's a part of that balance, right? It's a part of this thing of like questioning. And it's a part of the dynamics in this story that Gillian just uses like a master, because you don't know. She just seems like she's just a little tipsy, and maybe we're going to laugh this off. and everything is going to return back to normal, and it's not. And so I think having those types of characters and understanding the role that they play, and also setting the ultimate sort of filter for this, which is the town in general, right?
Mhm.
That hierarchy that's there, that everybody feels and everybody experiences that tension.
Yeah.
It plays so it plays into everything that happens in this town,
Mhm.
everything that happens from the top to the bottom, to the things that are swept under the rug, to the murders that happen.
Yeah.
And it's really has to be this intentional choice, and it sort of was sort of kicked off by the fact that she's the one that made it out.
Mhm.
We don't really say that, right?
Yeah.
She's the one that made it out, and now you're
Mhm.
back.
Mhm.
And that already sets up all kinds of thoughts and all the things that normally kind of wrap into that story, which can be a positive thing. In this case, it feels like a negative thing, but we just don't know how negative it is, and we
Yeah.
begin to get the residual of that or whatever from
Mhm.
these other characters,
Yeah.
because the main characters, again, we don't know if it feels like an almost like a what is it called, an unreliable narrator. It almost
Yeah.
feels like that.
Exactly, exactly. Which I think really does get to, right, that designation of a psychological thriller. Like
Right.
Camille doesn't actually know what's true about her own experience. And she is questioning everything, which
That's
means
right.
that we also we there's like almost a little bit of, I think, dramatic irony there, where like Camille is questioning everything, but we as the reader are like, no, no, don't do that, or like that's not good, you probably, no, that shouldn't have happened, like that's not normal, right? Like we kind of as the reader are sitting there watching her question it, and we're a little bit like, no, yes, do question it, like, or don't question it, no, that like, no, this is not, reliable, or don't do that, or whatever the case is.
First of all, you are way too calm about this. I mean, girl, get listen. I'm like the one loud, because the thing that I feel like in the beginning, because she doesn't question, her questions are actually turned inward.
Hmm.
She's questioned herself
Yeah.
versus it being, what if it's not me?
Yeah.
What if
So
it's
good.
this whole system is a sham,
Yeah.
right? It is. I And again, this is when you have the conversation and you talk about this, that you realize how easy it would be to feel like this was easy to do. But
Hmm.
when you really think about it, it is really challenging. And so having that tone, those themes, having that infiltrate and flow into your cast, and then how it sort of kind of comes right back around, sort
Hmm.
of, because each of those characters are showing exactly why this tone and this energy is sort of
Yeah.
taking over this entire experience, which leaves us where we are. And her being supposedly an insider only makes it worse.
Yeah.
All the things that Curry thought would give her a leg up. I mean, he kind of was right, right? But it also is what causes this situation to spiral out of control. So,
Yeah.
yes. So it kind of makes me think about the I'm going to say is an offshoot of like the trauma. This story, which is why you gave the caveat and sort of like the possible triggers, I think it's very interesting where in this story it feels like trauma is a character. It
Hmm.
sort of reminds me of like when we talk about Knock 'em Out,
Hmm.
we never forget the name of that town.
Yeah.
We never forget it. Why? Because the town is a character.
Hmm.
And part of this is sort of like, it's not just the trauma that is experienced by Camille, but
Hmm.
it almost is like how it sort of permeated and has taken over this town.
Yeah.
This sort of quaint little cute town with these Victorian homes and very clear distinction in economics status,
Hmm.
and almost like the mean girls are now adults, and it's still like it's a perpetuation of itself,
Yeah.
but it also becomes this thing where it's sad, and it
Mm-hmm.
helps. It is sort of points to how this can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's what makes this all so sad, y'all, where I was just like, I don't know if I could finish this book. But so that is it. I don't want to go into, because I don't want to give it away, but I think it's very interesting, and to have this sort of inanimate thing
Mm-hmm.
play such a huge role in everything that's happening in this story, and
Yeah.
for us to see it in different ways, even to the point that I feel that she wrote this with mother, daughter, and daughter number two have the same wound,
Yeah.
and them having the same wound. Not like when we kind of talked about it earlier, it's not just the same thing. No, it's the
Mm-hmm.
same wound. And you see how they each took that wound on, and how
Yeah.
it caused the consequences, and how they see the world, how they see themselves, how they coped.
Mm-hmm.
And each of them, it is all going out and coming back in, which makes
Yeah.
it so sad, but it makes it almost fascinating in a sense of like how people operate, you know?
Yeah.
So that's all I have to say about that, because I feel like it can get heavy, but I think it's interesting, and I think it's a hard thing to do, but it does make this story have sort of like a tangibleness that probably makes it a lot more appealing, because people can recognize something that happened to you that
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't have happened, but how it changes everything.
Yeah.
And I think that becomes something that's a shared experience with
Yeah.
something that maybe, like we are saying, like it's dark, it's a little traumatic, it's a little bit on the edge. And you're like, and my first question is, why in the world would somebody want to read this? But you realize like everyone has experienced trauma
Yeah.
in some capacity. And this is us just seeing how unchecked
Mm-hmm.
this is how it goes down.
Yeah.
And so I would love for us to now go into a little bit, like we've talked more about the main character right here, which is Camille, and some of the things that just kind of that you want to talk about her, what stands out about her as a protagonist, and
Mm-hmm.
sort of how it lends itself to this story.
Yeah. You know what I think is so interesting about Camille is she she is such a great example of a protagonist who does a lot of things that we probably don't agree with, right? Where it's like
Mhm.
the choices she makes, we're like, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't recommend you do that. Actually, like our feeling of her, like we sort of, for lack of a better turn of phrase, we disapprove of her choices, but we don't begrudge her for making them. And that, right, she's not quite like flat out unlikable protagonist. I think that's too strong. It's not the same as like Gil Peck, right, from The Whistleblower, where he
Mhm.
is just kind like he does have a backstory, but he has a lot of these scummy behaviors, and so much of this is about him sort of learning to be different. That's what we see in The Whistleblower, where he's just kind of unlikable, and we watch him become better. Camille is someone who makes a lot of bad decisions, but we're sympathetic, and like we understand because we watch, like we see how she is in the beginning, and every little bit, right, that we learn about her backstory, we're like, oh girl, like, oh no, right? And again, it evokes sympathy in us, even though we're simultaneously watching her make choices, and we're like, please don't do that, oh don't do that, don't do that, the whole time. And that's not that easy to do, right? Like it would
Mhm.
be very easy to sort of like dump, like to have her, like we talked about this, with we've talked about this with other books, where the protagonist kind of constantly bemoans their circumstances, and so they become kind of exhausting. In this instance, we see Camille just she's making active decisions, trying to work out the best decision that seems available to her. And like that's what's driving her. That's what we're watching her do, rather than kind of getting stuck in this sort of like internal, like, oh, my mom's so mean. And like, we just watch her deal with her mean mom rather than having her sort of like spin out in an internal monologue about it. And I think that that makes her, again, deeply sympathetic, even while we disagree with her, and without making her also exhausting to be around.
Yeah, I agree with that. The way that I have in my notes is that the reason why she's not unlikable is because she feels authentic, right? Part of that is that the way that Gillian wrote her, we are privy to her reasoning. And this is
Mm-hmm.
where really helping your character to have those moments where we as the reader get to understand what they're weighing,
Yeah.
what becomes the priority, and that it's reflected in the choices that they make. She's making poor choices, but we feel like, girl, listen, because what else is she supposed to do?
Yeah.
Like, it's like you it's I think it's, and the reason why it's hard to do is because you can start having that record player that's going on in their head. And instead, what we see is Camille in the middle of it,
Mm-hmm.
making decisions, trying to adjust. And then when she starts realizing that the adjustments are no longer working,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or the everything that she's built those adjustments on is not true, that's
Yeah.
when it begins to really like collapse on her. And
Mm-hmm.
again, she is freshly out of a situation.
Mm-hmm.
She's not 100% whole already.
Yeah.
So here, our in a pre-show, we sort of talked about, I was telling Rachel, I think this is a great book to look at as a counterpart to the discussion that we had when we talked about Fourth Wing,
Mm-hmm.
right? That you have these opportunities to tell who your character is, but what you really want is to show who your character is.
Yeah.
And this is why her making choices that you're like, girl, y'all always think of that movie Ghost when Whoopi Goldberg tell her, girl, you in trouble. That's how we feel about this girl right here. Because
Oh my
every
god.
time she get ready to be like, girl, listen, leave.
Yeah.
This is obviously not healthy for you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Go do you will not pass go, you will not collect $200, like all of that. But again, this is a part of her journey. And I think here, Gillian writing it in such a way that it's on the page, it sort of gives us, like I said in the last episode, permissions,
Mm-hmm.
right? It gives us these permissions because she's veering.
Mm-hmm.
She's got questionable tendencies, and
Mm-hmm.
we are watching her veer, and we are going for the ride. And
Yeah.
all look, listen, Gillian said, I'm just looking for open highway. Open highway? Listen, on a Texas road, when it's 85 is how we roll. You know what I'm saying? That's all she's looking for. And when she, listen, but don't give Gillian open highway because it gets crazy.
We are not ready.
I'm not ready. So I think this was a really great examination of a character that I feel like in any other circumstances, it could have been that she was unlikable, but she
Yeah.
did a great job of setting us up, which we talked about the tone, the sort of the setup, how she opened it up, how she opened up a lot of those loops so that we were
Mm-hmm.
questioning, like, wait a minute, what kind of reasoning is she doing?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And there were certain situations where she was talking about it like they had it wrong. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh, no, baby, no, like back up a little bit. And what
Yes.
happens is you begin to see, I would say, y'all, I'm not a doctor, okay? But I think this is one of those moments where you start seeing where your your development is stunted at the time when the trauma happened,
Mm-hmm.
right? And part of your reasoning is sort of locked in that place until
Mm-hmm.
you are whole, and you see she's not whole,
Yeah.
and you begin to see how she's reasoning through certain things. And it's not until people push back that are not from that environment, that are not from
Yes.
those circumstances, start pushing back, that it makes her think like wait a minute,
Mm-hmm.
and begin. It's like and you need somebody that's not of that environment, that has a fresh perspective, even if that perspective is self-motivated, even
Mm-hmm.
if that perspective may not even be for your good.
Mm-hmm.
It's just somebody that's not in that same cycle of
Mm-hmm.
sameness. And we see that. And I think what happens is, whether we agree with the choice or not, the choice feels in alignment with the character that we have come to know,
Yeah.
whether we want it or not. And I think that is when you have some really good character development, and
Yeah.
it helps you to have characters that can be in a same or similar situation. Now, this is not the same or similar to anything I've ever experienced, but if people feel like let's say for example in romance, it's like, well, how many times can you have a grumpy mountain man, whatever, right? When you are starting to expose us to the set of circumstances and their world view, and
Mm-hmm.
those things come into conflict, that is what explodes on the page if
Yeah.
you allow it to. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that is what happens here, that it makes for a very interesting journey that we go through with her. And since Gillian has like made it up in her mind, I'm calling by her first name, like her government, like we people, that she has made up in her mind, this all gas no breaks. She doesn't get a break until she's self-medicating,
Mm-hmm.
which is how she got here in the first place, right? So
Yeah.
it's a it's like really great authorial choices,
Yeah.
even though it would make me sad for her. And you don't, on one hand, you want to feel sad for her, and then you say sympathetic, and I think sometimes it's just heart gripping. Like,
Yeah.
anyways, the point is, which is why this is so dark. And so I think, you know, us being exposed to her reasoning, understanding why she's making those decisions, the fact that she's being placed back in the space that was the source of the original harm,
Mm-hmm.
right? That in itself causes so many things to happen. And Gillian's like, I'm about to use all of it. Sit back, watch me work. And so with that said, there was another thing that you sort of said in our pre-show that you didn't say here that I would love for you to be able to talk about. I hope you get, because I didn't say this earlier. I'm sorry. But you talked about how Camille had a broken relationship with violence.
Mm. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Let me let you finish.
No, I feel like one of the things that kind of that this makes me sort of piggyback on our conversation last week when we talk about that there's these two there are two
Mm-hmm.
narrative drives, right? Two driving forces for this plot, and you have both the crime, the murder mystery,
Mm-hmm.
the crime that's being solved, and you also are having this journey that Camille is going on, and part of the way that she sort of, I'm thinking like, because I, you know, I sew, like it's sort of sewing this together, is that that broken relationship with violence is being
Mm-hmm.
tested by the type of crime that she chose to highlight as a part of this story.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, like she did not come to play,
Mm-hmm.
and all of it being that's why you can't extract it from each other, and
Yeah.
that's what makes it locked in so much. And so that's why I thought you talking a little bit about that, because
Yeah.
I feel like it really piggybacks well on what we talked about last week.
Yeah, well, and I think, just like you said, one of the things we talked about last week is like the choices that she made in the plot itself, the crime itself. And so what we said in the pre-show was like, if it had been some random adult man who had been murdered and that was the subject of the investigation, like the theme would have felt utterly tangential, right? Because it's like,
That's
okay, we're
right.
talking like, and then it really would have felt like a bait and switch where it's like we were promised a murder mystery and instead you went, you wanted to spend time at this house where she's dealing with her mom, and where it's like you ended up telling us a different story than what you promised us through your inciting incident. Um but and this even comes back to tone, right? Because tone is also going to tell you how deep are you going to go into those dark backstories, right? Like how
Mm-hmm.
far are you going to go in forcing your protagonist to confront her wounds, and what kind of wounds those are, right? And the nitty gritty of how you go into that. um, and so when we have this theme of violence, when we're looking at Camille, what we learn, I mean, within the first chapter, I think it's the first chapter or early second chapter, is that Camille does have this dysfunctional relationship to violence, like sex and violence, and the way that these like almost feed into each other, and that she struggles to sort of like separate her experience of these things. Placing that inside of a crime story, right, where the crimes are like, and the kinds of people who are having the crimes perpetrated against them, right, these are this is pulling in what Camille's internal arc is with the themes and with the plot, so that again these things are intricately weaved together so that one speaks to the other, and that one, right, and it folds back into the next, and they're constantly just getting, I mean, but weave together is the only way I can think, or like the way that you like braid like bread when you're doing bread, and you like, you know, tuck one into the other and then you cross over, and they're all coming into each other into a whole where they become inseparable. And but you know, the choice of tone for the story is really really important for the things that she wanted to really talk about and the things she really wanted to explore. And you see the way that that plays out, like you can kind of, if you drew like a circle that was like, you know, it says violence and control, you could draw a circle of each character in the story and then draw a line from that circle to each character and say, how is this manifesting in their life, how has this shaped them? And that's one of the really great ways to develop a cast of characters that is actually exploring like the spectrum of a theme. And then just briefly, right, you kind of mentioned we have Curry and Richard as essential outsiders who are almost voices of reason, right? They are the only people in this story who are like operating fully outside of this system, who are present in Camille's experience to be like, that's not, no, that's not good. No, don't, no, that's not normal, right? And I think that you need that to sort of like, for even for Camille's character, right, to have something to counterbalance her experience and the sort of like insular culture that is Wind Gap, and to help her sort of like calibrate her experience as well.
But the one thing that I sort of liked and disliked at the same time was the fact that their presence was also self-serving, and
Mm.
it was just the same thing happening still now, right? He wanted to solve a case. He wanted to get a good story in the paper,
Mhm.
and this is just the same thing that happened to her before happening now,
Yeah.
and she thinks because she's
Hmm.
older that she's in control, and she's not
Hmm.
saying it that way, but that's
Yeah.
here's what I will say about this, and because I think we've talked about the other parts, but I'll say this about this. I think this is one of those times, especially if this is where you want to go as a writer, where your understanding of people and how people work and what causes people to do the things that they do is so important, because the reality is the reason why this works ultimately is because at some point in our lives, this has crossed our paths,
Hmm.
and it's a little too close.
Yeah.
It's a little too close to comfort. Now, yours may not have been what hers is,
Hmm.
but you can understand if you were, for example, a child in a situation and the adults did not protect you or
Hmm.
whatever, right? And I think that's the part where even when we feel on the edge of saying, okay, I don't know if I can keep reading this story, we want to know, is she going to be okay?
Yeah.
We want to know, is somebody going to stand up for right, or we're going to want to know, is she going to stop trying to self-medicate this thing and walk away? And I think
Hmm.
what Gillian does throughout this story and throughout the things that we're talking about today and what we talked about last week is she's like being the greatest puppeteer of all time, pulling those strings so that they are equal, they're sort of intertwined, almost like when you throw chords in a drawer, right? And you can't, you just
Yeah.
you can't pull them apart. It's ruined. And it becomes this big one clump of thing.
Hmm.
And here it becomes this question of like, for Camille, it becomes like, when will she realize like you can't fix that?
Mm-hmm.
All you can really do is fix yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Get
Yeah.
out of it. Girl, run. You in trouble, girl.
Yeah.
Listen, if I would go,
Yeah.
you in trouble, girl. And as we're on this, like I'll say this, and then if there's anything else you want to add before we close out this discussion, I think I've said this before in other episodes, and I'll say it at least a couple of times that I did not I liked the story, but I did not love the story. I am the happily ever after reader. If you've been around here, you know it. If you're new, what's up? All right. I love happily ever afters, and I feel like that was one of the things that took away from my experience because I felt like after going through all of this, I felt like the ending, I wanted something else for the ending. But at the same time, for the story that Gillian wanted to tell, she told it beautifully. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted, listen, y'all, I needed some rainbows and butterflies or something. I was like, dang, like, give her a break. Like, God, that's how I felt. And I'm the person I'll be crying all over my device because I'm just so sad for her. And so for me personally, that's why this would have been a story that I would have read had it not been for Rachel. But I will say that if you are wanting to push
Mm-hmm.
the conversation, if
Mm-hmm.
you are wanting to, this is talking about some very real stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
we will talk more about this later, like a little bit about like how time and whatever can influence a story. And I also think that this is again like what we talked about in plot, how you can talk about some things that you want to bring. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we've even talked about this a little bit when we talked about Ninth House and
Mm-hmm.
what she wanted to explore. This was
Mm-hmm.
also talked about when we read Before I Let Go, wanting to
Mm-hmm.
talk about counseling and in the Black community,
Mm-hmm.
feeling like it was a stigma and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
That you can find in fiction opportunities to do this. But here, what she showed like a boss is that it requires you to really be diligent and intentional about the story elements and
Yeah.
making sure that you bring those things in together seamlessly. And I feel like that's the part of the story where we're like, oh, she crushed that. But then
Yeah.
the other parts, the more the trauma, the prolonging of that, the sort of the tears at which we experience it,
Mm-hmm.
it does feel like it's a lot going on. So I don't want to not say that.
Yeah.
So yeah. Is there anything else that you would like for us to sort of touch on before we close out this episode?
I don't think so. The last thing I'll just mention in terms of like, strategies that you might consider taking away as a writer is the way you unveil a backstory, right?
Yeah.
Like, if we had gotten a dump of Camille's backstory up front, we all would have been like, okay, bye. Like, can't too much. No, like it's right. And it actually reminds me of how Lee Bardugo handled Alex Stern, right? Where we meet the character right where they are, and we see the kind of person they are and the kind of decisions they make. And we get breadcrumbs that say, oh, something made them this way. Like they're not just, because sometimes, and especially, I find this with female characters, especially, where you can have like tough girl character just for the sake of like, she's a tough girl because she's a tough girl, and that's just what I wanted her to be. Um, and sort of just, so you'll get like, for example, like a female character who's just like standoffish because she's supposed to be tough versus anchoring that in her, like in a deeper
Experience.
character. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, and an experience. So when we meet Camille, right, we see these features that she's kind of got these rough edges, and we're like, ooh. But we get these little, right, like from the very beginning, I haven't spoken to my mother in 8 years or something like that, and we're like, okay, that probably has something to do with the person I just met. And we kind of get these things in proximity to each other so that over time it builds a picture of Camille, and it unveils the backstory again as a part of that narrative drive. And I think that's when you've got a character, especially with like a very dark backstory, I think that's a really, really effective way to handle it so that we see who they are and we start unraveling why they are the way they are, so that they become sympathetic to us and we grow to understand them, and also don't just dump all of that on a reader who's like, okay, thank you for all of that, right? Where it's too much all at once. And so I think this is a really, really good example of doing that.
Yeah, and if you all want to hear any more about that, we talked about this in the plot as well. I agree. I think one of the things that you're doing here is not just about making them sympathetic, but I think also it's making us, the reader, curious. So it's almost like we are trying to drag information out of you because something about this isn't right, and we can't put our finger on it, but our spidey sense is screaming.
Yeah.
And when you get us to that point as the reader, listen, we will take whatever drop of water you are going to pass our way. We just didn't know what we was asking for. That's the thing that happened here. But that shows that that's when you have us on the hook. You have us on the hook just in the way that she was reasoning. In the little piece of information she would drop here or there, you're like, that felt off. Like, okay. A couple of times I was just like, huh. And it also made it sort of sad, but I think it also made us, again, I always say, like, you want us to lean in so that when you got to the parts of like what that was the source of that, we had already experienced the residual of it.
Yeah.
Right? We had already saw it in her reasoning, how she acted, how she treated herself, how she treated others. And so by the time we actually got to what caused it, it was like, oh, dang, she made it 10 times worse than you probably could have put together. So again, there is, this will be the last thing I say about it. I think there is a book we have not done it, and maybe it's something come in the future. It made me think about Everything. Have you read that? I think we've talked about it. But it made me sort of think about that, where you sort of have this big, huge bomb that really sort of breaches one of those sort of protected relationships, right? A daughter and a mother, right? And it's very interesting as I think about it right now. And it was the same sort of breach, but the way it's done there sort of was on a more lighter context, same breach, lighter context, versus here, that breach was darker, but it was also on the same road of what we were experiencing the whole time, with the tone and the consistency and the delivery of it. And so I think that's one of those moments where if you think you want to do something like that and that's something you want to explore, looking at the way that it's been executed across different stories, that one's much lighter. It's almost like in the YA sort of capacity versus this. But it was that same sort of breach on one of those like protected, sort of coveted relationships. And we're seeing it here where it's explosive. And it's not just explosive for Camille, it's explosive for Emma, and it's also explosive for Adora, right? And that's a part of what Gillian is exploring across this whole novel, which is, again, really nicely done. So with that said, y'all, that is what we have for you today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have, listen, Rachel over there wiping sweat off her brow. Okay. Listen. If you have any questions or comments, and let us know what you're reading, you can visit us online at storydeepdive.com. We'd love your comments, any ratings that you can give us based on wherever you encounter us, whether it's in a podcast player of your choice or even on YouTube, because we are over there as well. We will see you all next week as we come back and we begin to sort of wrap this as much as we can in a pretty bow, since Gillian did not put it up. I know, I'm being shady. I'm sorry. But we're going to bring this all together as we talk about our editor's takes and just some of the things that we can recommend to you as a writer telling a same or similar story, or things that you can sort of maybe glean from this story from our perspective. We'll talk about that next week. So take care. And as always, happy writing. Goodbye.